He should not have been taken off the air if it was pressure by the government. Actually, in that Ben Shapiro clip, he talks about it in more detail. It is a very dangerous situation to get into where the government can decide what people say and what people cannot say. I don't like Jimmy Kimmel at all. I don't watch any of his shows, but it is a very wrong line to walk where the government will step in and actually cancel or take people off air because they don't agree with what they say. I think that's a bad precedence to set. Now, with that said, it is absolutely the right of the people to push back on content that they don't like. And I think in this case, that's what happened. There was a lot of pressure put on Disney to silence this type of behavior because in that period of our US history, we were in a very crisis situation. This political attack, this assassination, this martyrdom, we got into that last week, but it was a very sensitive topic and a lot of people were hurt by the fact that rather than silencing the left side, right? Rather than saying like, hey, guys, it's pretty much what he did in his apology, like, hey, this was not supported by our parties. Both sides disagree with it. Violence is not the answer. We should have open debate. We should have conversation. What Charlie Kirk actually stood for. Rather than saying that in his opening monologue, he decides to put more fuel on the fire. And actually, Disney came out and said that's the main reason why they pulled the show. Because in a period of time when it was a very sensitive political scene, they didn't want to add fuel to the fire. And so they pulled him off the air. I don't even think they used the canceled terminology. I think that was added on by media outlets afterwards. They literally pulled him off the air because the following night, following the back pressure that he was getting, he wanted to go and double down on his comments, which have kept adding more fuel to the fire. So in this case, I think, to answer the question, I don't think government should get involved. I think the people should stand up and should voice their opinions on these things, and media outlets should respond to it, right? ABC lost a ton of ad affiliates post those comments, even after they put them back on. The advertisers decided not to go back with them, and I think that's what you should do.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The whole episode, it was happening during a sensitive time. So I mean, there are two sides, right? So on one side, the arguments that I've heard for removing Kimmel is like media broadcasts have responsibility and standards that they have to maintain. So did Kimmel, for example, violate company policies? In that case, it's justified. Did he spread misinformation, which, as Dennis showed, it seems like it was clear that the point he was making was not accurate. And then there's a point of like maintaining the public trust and the corporate brand itself, right? These are all the reasons why people would say that he should be disciplined. Now, against the disciplining, the arguments against disciplining, you do not want to have any interference in free speech or editorial independence, right? And if you look at these late night commentary, they often push boundaries. There's comedy, there's satire, and you definitely do not want government pressure. The FCC chairman should not be making threats. Someday, the tables will turn. If that's a leg on which people are standing, they'll regret it later. There is always a slippery slope, right? When the censorship come. But throughout media history in the US, media has always had the luxury to speak their mind. They have given a lot of leeway. And it's one of the foundations of a very sound democracy, even if we don't like what they say. Kimmel's comments were ill-timed and maybe even insensitive, but he may argue that he was just doing what he always does. And also, you have to be careful, right? Even if somebody violates something, the punishment should not be worse than the offense itself. So my personal reaction when I first saw his video was that I was looking for more. Like whatever he said did not bother me at all. I thought there was something more controversial that he said, so I was waiting for something more. And that's it. Like this is very normal in late night comedy. Worse has happened all the time, right? So it's up to the company to make the best decision they want about their finances and their brand image. They have the autonomy, but governments should stay out of it.
I also want to add one more point before you go, Dennis. It is mind-boggling to me that the left would complain about taking Jimmy Kimmel off air when during the entire Biden administration, conservative voices were being taken down by direction of the Biden administration. These are documents that have been released. Google just admitted a couple of weeks ago that they were asked by the Biden administration to take down conservative voices during election time, during different activities. There was no uproar at that time. Actually, it was the direct opposite. And I think as a society, if we want to move forward, we need to have civil conversation about stuff without being worried about losing our jobs or being worried about laughed off the face of the earth and silenced by every which group.
No, those are great points, and thanks for bringing that up. My take, suspending him was the right decision, primarily because he's an employee of Disney. As a Disney employee and host of a show with steadily declining ratings, he made misleading claims about the shooter's affiliations. Now, obviously, these claims were contradicted by the available evidence. They lacked any authoritative support at the time, as you can see from the New York Times article. But here's the catch. In doing so, he alienated a significant portion of his audience. To illustrate, if you're a restaurant cook or I'm a restaurant cook and I deliberately spit on half of the food for my guests, the business is going to lose half of its customers. Kimmel, similarly, he cultivated a divisive brand for years. He consistently insults a large share of the country, and his declining ratings reflect that reality. Now, to add on to your point, especially in a politically charged environment, such as the aftermath of such a tragic death, he chose to escalate rather than unify, alienating 50% of one's customer base. It's not good business practice, right? It's not responsible stewardship of a network platform. His suspension was justified. Now, on the right, people will argue that what he said infringed on the the First Amendment protections. That's misplaced. That's not necessarily true. I think, Bijou, you mentioned courts have long granted, comedians, satirists, commentators wide latitude to make, provocative, even misleading comments. These are statements that are protected by the First Amendment. Now, he didn't violate any free speech standards. He did not defame specific individuals. He didn't incite violence. He didn't issue threats. So his comments did not cross those legal thresholds. But as an employee of a network, clearly not doing his job. Now, as we saw, the left will argue that this reflects government overreach or censorship via the FCC, and they talk about the comments that Brendan Carr made. Now, it's interesting, last year there was a case by the Supreme Court, Murthy versus Missouri 2024, and the Supreme Court clarified that government influence violates the First Amendment only when there's a clear and direct link between an official's actions and the suppression of speech. So in the case of what Brendan Carr said, it's nebulous. We're not actually sure if this directly influenced the decision to suspend him or take him off the air. But again, ultimately for me, this matters not about free speech. It's about performance and accountability. As an employee of a private corporation, for us, if those were our performance ratings at the end of a year, we would be fired, right? His responsibility is to generate value for the network. His inability to do so, declining viewership, suggests that his approach, shouldn't serve the company's interests. He should engage in humor that is more unifying, brings together a broader audience rather than alienating literally half the country every single night. So to me, it's good business sense, and hopefully his suspension is a wake-up call for the network and his own brand. So we'll see what happens. I wanted to ask this question, right?